Welcome back to the Dataliction Podcast, where leaders learn to grow their businesses on purpose by turning data into action and action into growth. Today, we're kicking off an important conversation around what we call the adopt problem, the very real gap between introducing new technology and actually seeing it take root inside of the organization. This episode is less about tools and more about people and trust and the human side of change, especially as AI continues to move faster than most teams are ready for. This conversation came out of some very real moments, real experiences, honest reflection, and we're grateful to share it with you. And now let's jump into the conversation. The adopt problem. We are going to chat about that today. Travis and Josh, we're in the car again. Grateful to be able to enhance our time together. We do this regularly, but we also want to make sure and share this with anyone who's interested in this very real, dimly lit drive here at dawn. Josh, how has life been with you in your current change of welcoming in a kiddo? I know you've been going through a lot of change yourself. So as we talk through organizational change, how's that been here lately for you?
Thank you for asking. So we have a 3-month-old, turned 3 months old last Saturday, and it's gone incredibly quickly. He's sleeping pretty well, thankfully. He's always been a good night sleeper, but super excited for our first Christmas and kicking off traditions with our family. Even though he's not going to remember them, we're going to start some traditions that we'll use years ahead. So super great. I love being a dad.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anyone who has gone through or seen someone gone through the change management of infants and sleeping
and patience development.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it is not for the faint of heart. But honestly though, Travis, very similar to dealing with an infant in sleep, of having an organization try to change. And it's just, super hard. I think we've all seen those parents that for some reason they've got the perfect baby and the baby sleeps well, but just like organizations that don't change well, most babies don't sleep. Most organizations don't change well.
Yeah, I think it's really funny that we tend to try to grow up, and we all think that we have professionalized our conversations and our feelings. That's it. That we've professionalized our feelings, and we never really, like, as kids, we're really free and open, and we tried and we tried to explore new things. And yet then when we came to business, we were like, oh, we can't have fun. We can't do any of that. We got to shut things down before it even ever started, because I don't necessarily want to do more work. And I think your analogy, like you're talking about, like kids, like being successful is a really bad teacher. And all of a sudden you think, oh, well, we did it really good over here. And then they try to repeat it at another cycle. Or maybe they didn't have as many teammates on their team when they implemented something. And they're like, well, that last CRM went really well. You had 2 people in your company at that point in time. Now you've got over 50, maybe 100 when you're getting ready to adopt something.
I had not even thought about this when I wrote up our agenda to chat through today, but the analogy of raising a kid and then doing change in a company is so parallel. I don't want to polarize anyone who hasn't personally experienced this, but by proxy, I'm sure all of us have at least seen the movies or had a friend or a family member. But that said, it is interesting that one of the main things that you do see for parents who successfully transition, and, Josh, I know we've had conversations of how you guys have done this, is communicating really well with the people on your team. Obviously, this would be the people raising the kiddo, because this is a really intense change, and making sure you talk more, you stay connected. But let's talk specifically about AI and change, because that is the big change that's happening with people right now. But MIT has very specifically shown that 95% of companies are struggling with AI adoption. meaning that people are wasting money. These executives, these companies are wasting money on ROI investment because they're having an adopt problem. And so Peter Drucker, who is an Austrian American consultant and educator all around business, was born in the early 1900s, ended up living till he was almost 100 years old. Super wise dude. So Peter Drucker says technology changes quickly. Human behavior does not. And I think we're seeing a whole new wave of the adopt problem right now, of people who think because AI is powerful that somehow they can skip over a lot of the human elements of change. So I'm setting up the idea of AI, but then I'm going to just pull right back to some of the changes that we've seen ourselves. And so Josh and Travis, I'll cue you guys up in just a moment for change of ways, whether it's tech or process. My story of change on a way I deeply failed. I was leading a bunch of volunteers at a nonprofit. This would have been 20 years ago. And I had a brand new software that was going to help them all be more prepared when they came in to be developed. And I was super psyched about it. It was the industry standard, but it wasn't what they were used to. And so I did all the research on my own in this silo. I got everything planned. I even worked super long to make sure that when they showed up to serve that particular week, that they would walk into a brand new software and a system. I thought I was helping them because I did everything for them. Little did I know, I would have people actually quit the team because they did not like, not necessarily what I changed, but how I decided to roll out that change. So that obviously I've learned a lot over the last 20 years when it comes to change management. Travis, give me some stories that you've either seen, experienced, heard about the way that, it's not a people problem. I don't want to call people the problem, but the way that we make problems because we don't treat people like people. We treat them like systems.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think actually more on the leadership team, that's where new leaders stumble over the most, is I think I've got to prove myself, and they come up with all the systems and they do all the research. And then, and I'll give you, I'll just blatantly say, marketing does this. We go through and we're like, here's all the way the CRM will manage all the leads going through there. Here's the new way that a form will be filled out, and here's the new communication with it. But then you forgot about ever talking to sales about it. And you think, oh, well, sales, they just go in there and they just do the pitch. No, they actually they are also responsible, and they also are impacted by the changes that you do on the site. But then let me go back to a real story. So I was new in my career, and I had done all the research. I put a huge PowerPoint together, and it mapped out metrics. It mapped out goals. It mapped out the new process. I had already met with the vendors. I had already got everything lined up. I was almost ready to sign with all the vendors, get everything rolled out. I go to the leadership team. I'm new on the leadership team. I roll this out. I say, here's where we're doing this. Here's where we're going. Isn't this amazing? And all of them had walls up instantly. They're like, no, you can't do this. No, we can't do that. Oh, hey, did you even think about this? And I realized in that moment that I had never had one conversation with anybody else on the leadership team.
Oh, man.
And I was like, oh, I thought my moment of buy-in was actually in the leadership team meeting. That is the furthest place that you want to start to get buy-in.
Yeah, that's almost like the punctuation, not the sentence.
It's exactly right. So what I learned was I had to each individually go to each leader, and throughout my one-on-ones and when I'm having coffees with them, slowly introduce the ideas, get feedback from them, and then start putting it together. Now, you think as a mid-level manager or something like that, you're going to be like, well, don't they already know all the plans? No, they don't. They're not actually even thinking about all your plans that you've come up with. Hence why you've got to repeat it at least 2 to 3 times. And so you're not really repeating yourself so much to get everybody bored, but you're really making sure everybody's on the same page. But that happened around water cooler conversations. That happened when you're having those minor moments with your teams and just introducing the idea. I knew one guy that I would have to literally 2 to 3 weeks before I get ready to introduce any new idea, I would just throw out a question to him. And I knew like where it was going to go, but I just throw out a question. I said, hey, what do you think about this? And then I would not add anything more. And then the next week I'd be like, hey, did you ever think about that question I asked you? And they would come out with a whole outline. But it was that human moment that we think that people need to introduce systems like they are robots, but people need to think through. They need to maybe even talk to their own teams. Sometimes people like to have it be their own idea.
Yeah. Well, and I was about to say, one of the best things I ever learned from my therapist is that just because you know the answer doesn't mean you're helping someone else by telling them. And allowing people their own journey and speed to come to even the same conclusion as you is ultra important. And I also think, when you can book all the meetings of conference rooms, someone needs to book the water cooler, like put that in the system for the IT. Josh, I'd love to hear from you on some stories that you've seen, experienced, whatever, of just the human problems around. I don't like saying the human problems. You guys know what I mean, around change management and things that we can learn on the adopt problem.
Yeah. So I actually want to play off of Travis, what you were saying, John, what you just said there. I think one of the other things that is challenging when we're talking about this topic is when ego gets in the way. And I've had this being a technology guy, building out analytics and systems that I'm launching to teams. It's very easy for me to want to hit this pitfall where I say, hey, I'm coming in already figuring it out. Here you go. I did the work. Now we move on. But that's when the ego gets in the way of saying, hey, I've already assumed I know everything you need. I've assumed I understand your point of view and the problems you're experiencing. And I've made that mistake many times when I've short-circuited those. And then I've demoed a tool to a team that I was so excited about, but then it falls flat because it's like what you were saying, Travis, where it's like, hey, have you considered this or this or this? And I was just more like, hey, let me accomplish the task of launching the technology. It's also easy to fall into this mindset of, as long as I'm churning out work, I'm being productive. And that is not nearly always the case, because we can mistake activity for producing actual results. And I've had many times throughout my career where I've had to step back and say, all right, I need to actually produce fewer things at a higher quality because I'm actually taking the steps to talk with stakeholders, have those interviews, sit down and have those conversations and those perspectives. So I'm actually prepared to launch and build something that gets adopted because it fits what the end person needs.
Yeah. I thought about like, how many times right now are we getting such AI slop out of like, we're thinking we're being really productive, but we just did a couple of quick chats and then we're going to send this whole report to our executive team. And now I have to read through this like 9-page document that I was like, your prompt was bad. And like, you thought you were doing work and it was just bad work. And I was talking to a teammate on one of the companies that we're working with, and I said, it might take you 2 hours, 3 hours to do this project, and AI might be able to help supplement that with that. Maybe it cuts it down to an hour and a half, but you should be taking that other hour and a half and making whatever you're working on that much better, because everybody now has an equal playing field. Right now, they all have this, at certain points they have certain, I wouldn't say all the same LLMs, but we're at a point where there's everything kind of leveled up. But if you don't, you've got to figure out what is that speciality, what is that professionalism that you have to introduce to your project and making it better. And people just think that they can just kind of just work to do busy work, and it's causing a problem everywhere. I don't know.
There are two fundamental problems that people will run into and have run into for years, and now they have a tool that lets them be the worst of themselves. And those two problems is that more is better and that faster is better.
Yes.
And sometimes, yes. Seldom, yes. And what I mean by that is the fastest food that I can purchase is not the best food that I can purchase. The projects, the art, there's so many things in life that we understand full well that the longer it takes, the better it is. Yet somehow we believe that if I can do it in an instant, somehow it's more valuable. And that's just an absolute lie when it comes to change management, especially because people change at different speeds. And if you think you're going to share all the information in one human meeting, and you're going to get valid feedback from a spectrum of personalities at the table, you're only going to get feedback from the people who have the ability to give feedback right away. Even amidst our team, we all process at different speeds, communicate different speeds, think through different things. Travis, you and I were just chatting through different features that we want to put in the software. And generally speaking, I'll always say no first, and then I'll come back around and I'll figure it out. That's just what I do. That's
what I love about you. Though. That's what I love about it. We were like, I'll tell you something. And you're like, no, we can't do that. And then 2 days later, all of a sudden I see the feature in the product.
Yeah. And then I figured it out.
It was awesome.
But that's a great, it's a great proxy to the fact that I'm a no guy. You're a yes guy. Josh is a process guy. It's like, there's all these personalities, and we think it was like, hey, we're going to do a 2-hour strat ops and figure out everything all right away. That's how they all sound, of course.
Everybody's a bro.
Everyone's a bro. That said, can it happen? Has it happened? Sure. Can it happen better if we're more intentional? I can only say yes. Because if we meet people where they are, we're going to get better results of understanding where our team is. And if we know where our team is, and then we know where we want to go, then we know the correct path. But if we try to make the path to change from some sort of abstract spot to then somewhere in the future, we're going to draw a map that's as silly as having a "you are here" when you're at the mall. Do you guys remember what malls are?
Yeah.
you go up to the map in the mall and it's wrong. It's like, "You are here." It's like, no, I'm not. I'm over here. We don't want to draw the wrong "you are here" maps for our people because we're not actually getting to know where they are.
So, John, I want to make a quick point on the adoption side of things when it comes to technology and people. I think that and I've done this in my own career, and I've seen very different results when I do it correctly of when you're having those conversations, either one-on-one or with a group, when you come at it from the perspective of, hey, here is this technology that I'm looking to bring in. I'm trying to have this conversation in context of that technology. Like, hey, I want to fit your needs into what I'm trying to introduce. That's almost a square peg, round hole, cart before the horse kind of scenario, as opposed to a better way to do it when you say, hey, I don't have an agenda. I'm sitting here to just listen to you and understand what your needs are, what your world is like. I just want to sit and listen to your feedback, and I'm going to take that and ingest that, and then we'll figure out what we do. That's a flip. And I think people feel much more comfortable and connected and valued and listened to when you start with a human side of it, as opposed to, okay, let me go through and figure out how your needs fit into the solution I already have inside my head from a technology perspective.
Yeah, slow is smooth and smooth is fast, as the famous phrase goes, and trust must be built. Mm-hmm. Trust is not a binary switch. Trust is something that is nurtured and cultivated like a flower in the ground. And it takes intentionality and protection and nutrients and rain and wind and air, all these things that eventually it can bloom into something beautiful that lasts for so long. But maybe it's more like a tree than a flower. That said, Travis, let's wrap up this particular beginning of this concept around the adopt problem. We're going to begin a series in this and kind of break it down in chunks for leaders who are curious on how they can adopt things better as a team. But yeah, Travis, any final closing thoughts for us today?
Yeah, I'm gonna a couple of things. One is treating adoption like a system in place to where they're people and you're just going to shove something down somebody's throat. Obviously, we always say we're never going to do that. But by just throwing it up at a meeting and not doing the legwork with being intentional and talking with people ahead of time is a big failure that I would say either in leadership or even in management. And even if you're not maybe in management, you're just, an employee and you're starting out, even talking to your managers about what is their vision, what is their goals, what is the major company goals, so you can start aligning like maybe something you want to get across to those goals. Maybe there's a new piece of software that's going to make your job better. Well, start aligning that new software with the goals of that manager or that company. But you have to talk to them. You have to be open with them, and you have to have really good intentionality, which I love what you said, Josh, that you have to be present and you have to be with them and listening to them and leaving your ego at the door. I always love this phrase, leave your logos and egos at the door. And we have to do that as leaders and as just people as we're just growing, just be normal people, hearing what they are needing. And if you meet the needs of the people around you, I guarantee your needs will be met.
This is the perfect segue into the rest of our series. And so in case you are curious, maybe this is the first episode you've listened to or clicked on, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe because the next series that you're going to be able to see, we're going to break down what we have seen over our decades of experience are going to be the solutions to the big adopt problem we just shared with you. So please make sure and keep following this conversation. Travis, Josh, we're going to begin the next episode here in the car still because we're still driving. And but thank you again so much for listening. And let's keep up the conversation. We're incredibly grateful for this conversation and for the space it created for us to talk honestly about change, leadership, and the human side of adoption. All three of us walked away reminded that most adoption failures are not technology problems at all. They're people problems. And that rushing changes creates resistance instead of momentum. And that trust, communication, and patience are not optional if leaders want real results. If there's one thing we hope that sticks with you, it's that slower, more intentional change often leads to faster, healthier outcomes over time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Dataliction. If you want to take a real next step for you and your company, head to dataliction.com. Sign up for free access to our brand new platform, Adopt OS. Yeah, that's right. Right away, you can take a self-serve audit that helps you to understand where your organization is actually at today. You'll receive a full downloadable Adopt summary, your personalized Adopt grade, and a ready-to-use AI policy to help your team get started. Yes, all three of these things completely free. So go take advantage of that on the website right now and start helping your team move forward with AI on purpose.